whispered Hub.
Hi, my name is Rosie. I'm an English student, and I've been struggling with learning vocabulary lately. It's been tough for me to remember all those words. But I'm determined to improve, so I decided to seek help from my professor, Mr. David. I walked into Mr. David's office feeling nervous but hopeful. He's always been a great teacher, so I knew he could help me figure out a way to tackle this vocabulary challenge. Hello, Rosie. What brings you here today? Mr. David greeted me with a warm smile. Hi, Mr. David. I've been having trouble learning vocabulary, and I was hoping you could give me some advice. I explained. Of course, Rosie. Vocabulary is a crucial part of language learning, but it can be tricky at times. Let's sit down and discuss some strategies that might help you, he said, motioning for me to take a seat. As I settled into the chair, I felt a sense of relief knowing that I wasn't alone in this struggle. With Mr. David's guidance, I was determined to conquer the world of words. All right, Rosie, let's start by building a strong foundation for your vocabulary, Mr. David began. He explained that one of the best ways to learn new words is by reading regularly. Reading exposes you to a variety of words in different contexts, which helps you understand their meanings better, he said. But what if I come across a word I don't know? I asked, feeling a bit overwhelmed. That's a great question, Rosie. When you encounter unfamiliar words, try to guess their meanings based on the context of the sentence. If you're still unsure, look up the word in a dictionary or use a dictionary app on your phone, Mr. David advised. I nodded, realizing that understanding the context could be a powerful tool in deciphering unfamiliar words. Additionally, make a habit of keeping a vocabulary notebook, Mr. David continued. Whenever you learn a new word, write it down along with its definition and a few example sentences. This way, you can review and reinforce your learning regularly. Feeling inspired, I grabbed a notebook from my bag and vowed to start jotting down new words immediately. Lastly, don't forget to review your vocabulary regularly. Repetition is key to retention, so take some time each day to go over the words you've learned, Mr. David reminded me. With Mr. David's guidance, I felt more confident in my ability to build a strong vocabulary foundation. I was ready to dive into the world of words and expand my knowledge one word at a time. Rosie, learning vocabulary doesn't have to be boring. In fact, there are plenty of fun ways to make it enjoyable, Mr. David said with a twinkle in his eye. I perked up at the idea of making learning fun. Really? How do we do that? I asked eagerly. One way is to use mnemonics, Mr. David explained. Mnemonics are memory aids that help you remember information more easily. For example, you can create a silly sentence using the first letter of each word you want to remember. He gave me an example. To remember the order of the colors in a rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, you can use the mnemonic Richard of York gave battle in vain. It's a fun way to recall the sequence. I chuckled at the funny sentence and realized how effective mnemonics could be in remembering vocabulary. Another fun method is to play word games, Mr. David suggested. Games like crossword puzzles, word searches, and Scrabble not only challenge your mind, but also help reinforce your vocabulary skills. I nodded enthusiastically, imagining myself playing these games and having a blast while learning. And don't forget about using technology to your advantage, Mr. David added. There are many educational apps and online platforms specifically designed to help you learn vocabulary in an interactive and engaging way. Feeling excited about the prospect of making vocabulary learning more enjoyable, I thanked Mr. David for his creative suggestions. With these fun techniques in mind, I was ready to turn learning into a playful adventure. Rosie, have you ever noticed how stories have a way of sticking in your mind? Mr. David asked. I nodded, remembering my favorite childhood tales and how I could recite them word for word. Well, you can use the power of storytelling to learn vocabulary too, Mr. David explained. Try creating short stories or scenarios using the new words you've learned. When you associate words with a memorable story, it becomes easier to remember them. I was intrigued by the idea. Can you give me an example? I asked. Sure. Let's say you're trying to learn the word enormous. Mr. David began. You could imagine a giant elephant standing in the middle of a tiny room, struggling to fit inside because it's so enormous. The image of the elephant stuck in a small room will help you remember the meaning of enormous. I smiled at the vivid image Mr. David painted with his words. It suddenly seemed much easier to remember new vocabulary by connecting them to stories. Another way to connect words with stories is through visualization, Mr. David continued. Close your eyes and picture the word in your mind. Try to imagine a scene or scenario that represents the meaning of the word. The more vividly you can visualize it, the better you'll remember it. I closed my eyes and tried visualizing a few words we had discussed earlier. It was amazing how quickly the meanings came back to me when I associated them with mental images. By incorporating storytelling and visualization into your vocabulary learning routine, you can make the words come alive in your mind, Mr. David said encouragingly. Feeling inspired by the power of storytelling, I couldn't wait to start creating my own word adventures and unlocking the mysteries of language one story at a time. Rosie, one of the most effective ways to learn vocabulary is by immersing yourself in the language as much as possible, Mr. David emphasized. I leaned forward, eager to learn more about this immersive approach. Immersing yourself in the language means surrounding yourself with English in everyday life, Mr. David explained. Listen to English music, watch English movies and TV shows, and even try to think in English whenever you can. I nodded, realizing that exposing myself to English in various forms could help me become more familiar with the language and its vocabulary. Another way to immerse yourself is by engaging in conversations with native English speakers or fellow language learners, Mr. David suggested. Practice speaking and using the words you've learned in real-life situations. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's all part of the learning process. I felt a bit nervous about speaking English with others, but Mr. David's encouragement gave me the confidence to give it a try. Additionally, consider joining English language clubs or online communities where you can interact with others who share your passion for learning, Mr. David added. These environments provide a supportive space for practicing your language skills and expanding your vocabulary. Feeling excited about the prospect of immersing myself in the English language, I made a mental note to start incorporating more English into my daily routine. With Mr. David's guidance, I was ready to dive headfirst into the world of language immersion and take my vocabulary learning to new heights. Rosie, let's talk about a handy tool for vocabulary learning. Flashcards, Mr. David said, holding up a stack of colorful cards. I nodded eagerly, recognizing flashcards from my previous studies. How do they help with learning vocabulary? I asked. Flashcards are great for quick recall, Mr. David explained. You can write a word on one side of the card and its definition on the other. Then, you can shuffle the cards and quiz yourself by flipping them over and trying to remember the meaning of each word. I liked the idea of testing myself with flashcards. It seemed like a fun way to reinforce what I've learned. Another benefit of flashcards is that they're portable, Mr. David continued. You can take them with you wherever you go and review your vocabulary whenever you have a few spare minutes. I imagine myself carrying a small stack of flashcards in my bag and reviewing them during my daily commute or while waiting in line. Plus, you can get creative with your flashcards, Mr. David added. You can add pictures, example sentences, or even mnemonics to help you remember the words more effectively. Feeling inspired by Mr. David's enthusiasm, I decided to create my own set of flashcards to aid in my vocabulary learning journey. With these colorful cards by my side, I was ready to tackle any word that came my way. Rosie, have you ever heard of breaking down words into smaller parts to understand them better? Mr. David asked, holding up a long word. I shook my head, curious to learn more about this technique. Breaking words into parts is called word decomposition, Mr. David explained. It involves breaking a complex word into its root, prefix, and suffix to understand its meaning. He wrote the word unbelievable on the whiteboard and divided it into 3 parts: undash, prefix, believe, root, and able, suffix. By breaking down the word, you can see that undash means not, believe is the root word, and able means capable of, Mr. David pointed out. So, unbelievable means not capable of being believed. I was amazed at how dissecting a word could reveal its meaning in such a clear way. Word decomposition can help you decipher unfamiliar words and expand your vocabulary, Mr. David continued. Once you understand the meanings of common prefixes, roots, and suffixes, you'll be better equipped to figure out the meanings of new words you encounter. I nodded, eager to start breaking down words and unlocking their meanings using this helpful technique. Practice breaking down words whenever you come across them in your reading or vocabulary exercises, Mr. David advised. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become in your ability to tackle even the most challenging words. Feeling empowered by the concept of word decomposition, I made a mental note to incorporate this technique into my vocabulary learning routine. With Mr. David's guidance, I was ready to dive deeper into the world of words and uncover their hidden meanings. Rosie, let's talk about another helpful tool for learning vocabulary, word maps, Mr. David said, gesturing to the whiteboard. I leaned forward, intrigued by the idea of using visuals to aid in vocabulary learning. A word map, also known as a semantic map or a graphic organizer, is a visual representation of the connections between words. Mr. David explained, it can help you understand how words are related to each other and how they fit into different categories or contexts. He drew a circle in the center of the whiteboard and wrote the word animals inside it. Then, he drew several lines radiating from the circle and wrote words like mammals, birds, and reptiles connected to it. As you can see, animals is the main category and mammals, birds, and reptiles are subcategories, Mr. David pointed out. You can further expand each subcategory by adding more specific words related to them. I nodded, impressed by how the word map visually organized the vocabulary into logical groupings. Creating word maps can help you organize and visualize your vocabulary, making it easier to remember and recall. Mr. David said, "You can use them to explore the relationships between words, brainstorm synonyms and antonyms, or even practice using words in sentences." Feeling inspired by the power of word maps, I decided to start creating my own to organize and expand my vocabulary. With Mr. David's guidance, I was ready to embark on a visual journey through the world of words and discover new connections along the way. Rosie, one of the most important aspects of learning vocabulary is regular review, Mr. David said, emphasizing the importance of repetition. I nodded, understanding that reviewing regularly could help me retain the words I've learned for the long term. Make it a habit to review your vocabulary regularly, Mr. David advised. Set aside some time each day or week to go over the words you've learned, whether it's through flashcards, quizzes, or simply reading through your vocabulary notebook. I made a mental note to dedicate a specific time each day for vocabulary review, knowing that consistency was key to success. Try different review techniques to keep things interesting and engaging, Mr. David suggested. You can create quizzes for yourself, use spaced repetition apps, or even teach the words to someone else. The more actively you engage with the words, the better you'll remember them. I like the idea of mixing up my review methods to keep things fresh and exciting. It seemed like a great way to stay motivated and focused on my vocabulary learning journey. Remember, learning vocabulary is a marathon, not a sprint, Mr. David reminded me. Be patient with yourself and celebrate your progress along the way. With regular review and perseverance, you'll continue to expand your vocabulary and become more confident in your language skills. Feeling encouraged by Mr. David's words, I vowed to make regular review a priority in my vocabulary learning routine. With his guidance and support, I was determined to achieve my goal of mastering English vocabulary and becoming a more proficient language learner. Rosie, as we come to the end of our journey together, I want to remind you of the importance of celebrating your progress and persistence in learning vocabulary, Mr. David said, his eyes sparkling with pride. I smiled, feeling grateful for all the guidance and support he had provided throughout our journey. Learning vocabulary is not always easy, but you've shown great determination and resilience, Mr. David continued. Each word you've learned is a step forward on your language learning journey, and that's something to be proud of. I felt a swell of pride in my chest, knowing that every word I had learned had brought me closer to my goal of becoming fluent in English. Remember to celebrate your achievements, no matter how small they may seem, Mr. David said warmly. Whether it's mastering a difficult word, improving your pronunciation, or confidently using new vocabulary in conversation, take a moment to acknowledge your progress and pat yourself on the back. I nodded, realizing that celebrating my achievements would help me stay motivated and encouraged along the way. And don't forget to keep pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, Mr. David added. Continue seeking out new words, practicing your language skills, and embracing opportunities to learn and grow. With a renewed sense of determination and gratitude, I thanked Mr. David for his invaluable guidance and bid him farewell. As I stepped out into the world, I carried with me not only a wealth of new vocabulary, but also the confidence and resilience to continue my language learning journey with joy and enthusiasm. Here's a brief overview of all the strategies and techniques provided by Mr. David. Reading regularly. Read often to encounter new words in different contexts. Guess the meaning from context and look up unfamiliar words in a dictionary. Vocabulary notebook. Keep a notebook to jot down new words along with their definitions and example sentences. Review regularly. Making learning fun. Use mnemonics, play word games, and utilize technology to make learning vocabulary enjoyable. Connecting words with stories. Create short stories or scenarios using new words to make them memorable. Visualize the word's meaning through storytelling. Immersing yourself in language. Surround yourself with English in everyday life. Listen to English music, watch movies, engage in conversations, and join language clubs or communities. Using flashcards for quick recall. Create flashcards with words on one side and definitions/examples on the other. Shuffle and quiz yourself regularly for quick recall. Breaking words into parts. Decompose complex words into root, prefix, and suffix to understand their meanings better. Practice word decomposition whenever you encounter new words. Using word maps to visualize connections. Create word maps to visually represent connections between words. Organize vocabulary into categories and explore relationships between them. Reviewing regularly for long-term retention. Set aside time each day or week to review vocabulary. Use various review techniques such as flashcards, quizzes, and spaced repetition. Celebrating progress and persistence. Celebrate achievements and progress, no matter how small. Stay persistent, push yourself outside your comfort zone, and continue seeking out opportunities to learn and grow.